So hey guys, welcome to this video. और इस वीडियो में I'll be telling you a podcast recommendation that I recently watched. So this podcast is between Chris Williamson and Alex Hormozi. So this podcast is run by Chris Williamson and Alex Hormozi is a guest on the podcast. आपने definitely Chris Williamson या फिर Alex Hormozi को देख रखा होगा Instagram Reels पे in those short clips. So इन दोनों के बीच का podcast is about 2.5 hours long. I know ये बहुत ही लंबा साउंड करता है, but this is one of the most helpful podcasts that I've seen in last few months. तो इस podcast को Chris बहुत ही अच्छे से ड्राइव करते हैं with all the great questions that he's asking Alex about different aspects of life, about human nature and what Alex thinks about it. तो ये podcast start होता है with Hormozi telling about his content journey और कैसे अपने चैनल को उन्होंने इतना ग्रो करा without getting demotivated. और इसमें Alex एक बहुत ही अच्छा perspective देते हैं about his channel not getting too many views और कैसे उन्होंने अपने आप को demotivate होने से रोका.
And so the combination of I can have a small room and I'm really impacting. Like when I get a view that has like 13 views on it, for like a video in the early days, I'd be like, well, shoot, I made this video and 13 people saw it. It's like a small room. Like that works. But looking at both absolute growth and relative growth. So it's like, okay, well, I went from 10 followers this month to 15 followers this month. It's like, well, you can say that you only gained 5 followers. I was like, or you can say that you went up by 50%. And that was exciting.
उसके बाद एलेक्स और क्रिस बात करते हैं अबाउट डू इट ऑल माइंडसेट, जो कि बहुत सारे लोगों में है. इवन विद मी इट्स अ प्रॉब्लम दैट आई फील लाइक डूइंग अ लॉट ऑफ डिफरेंट थिंग्स एंड आई फील कॉन्फिडेंट कि मैं ये सब भी कर सकता हूँ. एंड इट्स जस्ट अ पर्सपेक्टिव दैट दे बोथ गिव ऑन व्हाट डू दे थिंक अबाउट इट एंड हाउ दे हैव डेल्ट विद इट.
I can't remember the name, but I'll say that. Yeah, it's Churchill again. He said, success comes down to doing the obvious thing for an extraordinary period of time without convincing yourself you're smarter than you are. And I just love that quote.
Why do you not need to convince yourself that you're smarter than you are if you're doing the same thing?
I think it's because you think you can handle both. And so you're like, oh, I got this.
Oh, okay. Because if you did think that you were smarter than you are, you would then start to take on more stuff. So a quote from John Maxwell, which I absolutely adore, that says, you cannot overestimate the unimportance of practically everything. Which is just fucking perfect.
और एलेक्स इसमें एक और टॉपिक पे बात करते हैं अबाउट फाइंडिंग मोटिवेशन इन डिफ़िकल्टी, जो कि इस बारे में वो काफ़ी और अपने वीडियोज़ में बात कर चुके हैं अबाउट हाउ इट इज़ वेरी ईजी टू बी सक्सेसफुल एट दिस टाइम, जिसका कि आंसर इज़ कंसिस्टेंसी एज पर एलेक्स एंड क्रिस. दे बोथ अग्री ऑन इट वेरी वेल.
I use this stat all the time. 90% of podcasts don't make it past episode 3. And of the 90%, the 10% that do, 90% don't make it past episode 20. So by making 21 podcasts, you're in the top percentile of all podcasters ever in history. That's what hard feels like. And that's not even hard. It's just consistent. Fuck me. It's less than half a year.
Or of course, when there's talk about motivation and overcoming the difficulties, there is talk about David Goggins.
Goggins said this in the episode with me, and it gave me chills when he said it. He was like, it's so easy to be successful nowadays because people are weak.
Yeah.
Everybody's weak. Dana White says it as well.
Yeah.
I tell my kids, it is so easy. If you are even a weekend savage, you will run these kids over.
एक और कोट मेरे को जो बहुत ही अच्छा लगा from this podcast is which says, you stay in poverty until you learn 2 words, my fault. और I know it's hard to understand at first, but let's see what Hormozi has to say on it.
Segues into one of my favorite ones, which is you stay in poverty until you learn the first lesson of poverty, which is 2 words, my fault. And so when I was younger, I was really angry at my parents, like many people are, right? Justified or not, doesn't really matter. I was very angry and I blamed them for the woes of my life. And I realized when I was 19 that these people that I hated, I was giving all the power over the fact that I wasn't the person I wanted to be. And I was like, well, it's their fault. And the idea that I had actually given these people that I hated power over my success was ultimately something that made me feel sick to my stomach and was what allowed me to point the finger of blame inwards and say my fault, and then at least take ownership over the fact that sure, maybe your dad didn't hug you enough, or maybe your mom wasn't present, or whatever it is, right? It's like, and और लास्ट पार्ट ऑफ द पॉडकास्ट में एलेक्स बात करते हैं अबाउट स्ट्रगल्स विद हिज फैमिली और कैसे उनकी एक्सपेक्टेशंस को वो नहीं पूरा कर पा रहे थे एंड व्हाट डिड ही डू टू जस्ट डू हिज ओन थिंग. और इस सब के बारे में एलेक्स बहुत ही अच्छे से शेयर करते हैं अबाउट व्हाट डिड ही फील अबाउट हिज डैड, अबाउट हिज मदर व्हेन ही वाज टेकिंग सम बोल्ड स्टेप्स इन हिज बिजनेस. और इस सब डिस्कशन के अंदर एलेक्स एक कोट बोलते हैं जो कि मेरी फेवरेट कोट है ऑफ दिस पॉडकास्ट, व्हिच सेज, पेन ऑफ स्टेइंग द सेम इज सो मच मोर देन पेन ऑफ डूइंग द चेंज. And this is the Tony Robbins quote, but it's just when the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of change. And I think that I think pain moves people far more effectively than pleasure does. Like the easy way to prove it is like point a gun at someone's head and you have absolute compliance and they will do what they need to do, right? Automatically, just like that. Like death is the great motivator and the gun just reminds you. And so I think that if you can create the figurative gun to your head of the pain that you're experiencing, and then I'm a big fan of future casting out negative scenarios. So people talk about like positive visualization. I prefer negative visualization, which is what if I keep doing what I'm currently doing for the next 10 years? What will my life look like then? That usually takes my current pain and then just magnifies it. And then that allows me to get my action threshold high enough that it goes over the edge so that I can take that first move.
And which is just an amazing perspective that Alex gives about his situation where he was in a situation जो कि उन्हें बहुत ही अच्छी नहीं लग रही थी, and he just wanted to change that current situation of his life, which is kind of a part with most of us, and I have also been there. I love listening these two people talk and what they had to say about human nature and different parts of their life and sharing everything so openly. And you should also definitely watch this whole podcast. I have not shared everything that is talked about in this podcast, और बहुत सी और ऐसी चीज़ें हैं, बहुत से और ऐसी बातें हैं which are done in this podcast, and they are just like really amazing, and they just gives you a better perspective to go through and be more successful. So do let me know in the comments after watching this podcast and say how do you like it.